True Martial World. Author, Cocooned Cow. Translation Group, Gravity Tales. Translator, Seekdalan. Chapter 001, Grave of Yiyun. Yiyun deeply understood the fact that, in this day and age, life was not easy. But he never thought that he would die in his prime. This morning, Yiyun went mountain climbing with two of his good friends. One of them was a pretty babe, so naturally this was a splendid event. Young people tend to like thrills and Yiyun was no exception. Being a goody two-shoes and climbing mountain paths already cleared by other climbers would be meaningless, so they chose an isolated barren mountain. Reaching the halfway mark of the mountain, they discovered a cave. The babe that came with them spontaneously got excited and insisted on entering. However, the moment they entered, something unexpected happened. Yiyun found a rectangular purple crystal inside the cave. It looked like a crystal card that one would see in science fiction movies. As soon as he discovered and, out of curiosity, touched it, the cave walls started to rumble and the cave collapsed. It was hard to describe what emotions Yiyun was going through as he saw several tons of rock falling down. If one had to use a phrase to describe it, it would be, "Only when dying does one truly know what dying is." He was still young, healthy, and good-looking. And, he was still a virgin. He was supposed to have a tremendously bright life ahead of him, but now, it was all about to disappear. The sadness and hopelessness he felt from knowing this was suffocating. The boulders did not smash down onto Yiyun, but instead, sealed off the cave entrance. The situation of being buried alive in such a tight space inside a cave in the mountains, without any food, no water, and with limited air made it crystal clear to Yiyun that this place would probably become his grave. Yiyun stared blankly at the thick mountain wall in front of him. Under his phone's flashlight illumination, that thick rock wall resembled the faces of devils. It was cold to the touch and the coldness seeped into Yiyun's heart bit by bit, weighing down on it. He didn't have the slightest clue as to where his climbing partners had disappeared to. They were all grouped up closely when they entered the cave. Yet once the cave collapsed, his two friends, who should have been trapped with him, had mysteriously disappeared. It was as if they had never entered the cave with Yiyun. He could still clearly remembered that, half a minute before the cave collapsed, he heard the babe behind him say how she was afraid that there might be snakes in the cave. How could two people just suddenly disappear? How did a perfectly good cave just collapse? It really was a hopeless situation inside the cave. There was no signal on his phone and the fate of his two friends was uncertain. Yiyun did not want to sit idly by while waiting for death. He even thought about digging a way out. If the blockage was small, there would be a glimmer of hope by digging. When a person is confronted by death, he can exhibit extremely strong motivation and fighting spirit. Everything, even something with the tiniest sliver of hope, would be tested. Yiyun acted immediately, but digging with his bare hands wouldn't do. He had not brought any tools, like a dagger, with him. But at this moment, Yiyun had a stroke of brilliance. He remembered the crystal card. It looked like a small shovel, so although it was small and didn't even have a handle, digging with it would be much better than digging with his bare hands. Turning his head towards the mysterious crystal card, Yiyun suddenly had a thought. Upon careful recollection, the cave collapsed the moment he touched that card. How could it be coincidental? And the biggest mystery was that both his friends vanished into thin air. This series of inexplicable phenomena combined together, filled Yiyun's head with questions. Could everything that happened today be due to this crystal card? He looked at the purple crystal card. It was slightly bulging. It sat nicely on a stable piece of rock, emitting a faint glow. Yiyun hesitated for a moment before he switched off his phone's flashlight. He realized that, despite the pitch-black darkness of the cave, he could still see because of the purple card's faint glow. In this moment, he understood that this crystal card could not be made out of amethyst, because crystals do not glow. However, in the natural world, there are some minerals that were able to glow due to traces of radioactive elements. But in his current situation Yun could not care less about the possibility of radioactivity harming his body. He picked up the purple crystal card to examine it. If the collapse was due to this crystal card, could it possibly be his ticket to survival? Yun knew that there wasn't much hope, but at death's door, he had to try everything as a last resort. The crystal card was cool to the touch, with a coldness that seemed to drip through the blood vessels in his arm, all the way to his heart. The card itself was purple throughout and slightly larger than an adult's hand, but no thicker than one's palm. On one side of the card, there appeared to be mysterious engravings. They seemed unnatural, as if carved by human hand. Who could have carved it? Could these engravings be some ancient symbols, or a mysterious language? Or could it be extraterrestrial, something from the stars? With these strange events, Yun's brain started to fill with questions. He was sure the cave collapse had something to do with the crystal card. There was no earthquake, so how could the cave just suddenly collapse? With the crystal card in hand, Yun realized that the crystal card's edges were as sharp as blades. This ignited hope in him. He could conserve energy by digging with it. Yun stopped hesitating, and with the crystal card in hand, moved towards the rock wall of unknown thickness. Gripping the edge of the crystal card with both hands, he forcefully shoved it down. That's when something inconceivable happened. The originally firm and stout rock was sliced apart like tofu by this palm-sized card. Yun, who had used too much strength on the rock that showed no resistance, hit his head on the wall. Yun was dumbfounded. He couldn't care less that he had just scraped his forehead. He blankly stared at the purple crystal card in his hand. After the initial shock passed, he experienced jubilation. This was pretty much a lightsaber from a science fiction movie. At this moment, he wasn't in the mood to examine how this card could be that sharp. He only focused on digging his way out. Grabbing the crystal card firmly with both hands, Yun started digging a hole like a mole. The crystal card moved without resistance, even easily cutting through granite. Yun felt excited. He had picked up a treasure. If he could make it out alive, this card would change his life. It might even have alien technology embedded within it. Yun didn't know how long he had been digging and wasn't sure if it was an illusion, but whenever he felt exhausted, the crystal card in his hands would emit a coolness, rejuvenating a tiny bit of his strength, allowing him to continue digging without rest. It was not possible to know the time inside the cave, but Yun was motivated by his thirst for survival to keep moving forward without any rest. His cell phone had already run out of battery. He had totally lost his sense of time. Had he been digging for 3 days? 5 days? 7 days? Yun did not even realize that, even without a single morsel of food or water, he had miraculously not yet died. It was as if the crystal card's energy prolonged his life. If he were to look back at the path he had dug, Yun would have discovered how long it had become, but Yun did not pay any attention to that as his sight had already started to blur. Unable to even see clearly ahead, unable to see the rocks, he only felt the crystal card emitting a refreshing coolness in his hands. He was slowly losing his senses, but he kept digging with perseverance and tenacity. Finally, at a certain moment, he realized there was a glimmer in front of his eyes. It was as if he saw a light pass through a crack in the soil, illuminating his face. Just like when a pail of water is splashed on an unconscious person, Yun was suddenly wide awake. Light. There's light. Yun had never ever appreciated that light could be so beautiful. He couldn't control his tears as all the energy he previously lost, flooded back into his body. He gritted his teeth and dug like crazy. Finally, Yun was blinded by the bright rays shining down on him, as he struggled to keep his eyes open. He had managed to dig out. I've succeeded. I survived. Yun wanted to shout out loud, for without experiencing the darkness or knowing how to appreciate the light, or knowing what death is, it would be hard to understand the sanguinity of life. Yun laid down on the ground, taking huge gasps of air as he looked at the blue skies and white clouds. He had never felt that the blue sky was any prettier than now. Although his body was extremely tired, hungry, and thirsty, Yiyun did not rest for long as he gritted his teeth and got up, trying to contact his two friends. Yiyun may have escaped death, but he did not know what had happened to his friends. But, his cell phone was out of battery. Yiyun looked around, hoping to see signs of life, but with just a glance, Yiyun was dumbfounded. How? How could this be? Yiyun clearly remembered that while climbing the mountain, he was buried alive in a cave, and climbed out of the mountainside alone. But, Yiyun was now located in a vast expanse. Although there were mountains around, the distance to them would have run a horse to its death. Yiyun could not believe he had dug such a long tunnel. Surrounding him were several mounds with wooden sticks stuck on each mound. On the wooden sticks were gruff words of unknown origin written using charcoal. Could this be a graveyard? Yiyun was dumbfounded. How did he appear among so many tombstones? Having escaped death once, Yiyun's mental strength was now much stronger, so although he was faced with an illogical situation, he could still calm himself down and examine the tombstones carefully. These tombstones did not look like they came from a modern cemetery. In a modern city's cemetery, all the tombstones were either made out of marble or granite and arranged neatly. But the tombstones in front of him, even rural tombstones, would be much better than this. Wait. Yiyun suddenly discovered something as he lowered his head to take a look. The tunnel he had just climbed out of was still there and was situated in front of a mound. By the side of the mound, a wooden plank was used as a tombstone. On the wooden plank were weird words, but for some unknown reason, Yiyun suddenly got a spark in his mind. He could now read all the words. It said, "Beloved brother, grave of Yiyun." And on the side there was written 5 words, "Elder sister Zhangziro." Yiyun's grave. Yiyun was completely stupefied. He had clearly been buried alive inside a cave on a barren mountain. But now he had dug his way out of a grave, and it was even his. What sort of worldly joke is this? Also, the words were not Chinese, nor were they English. How was he able to read all these weird words? This must be a dream, right? Yes, it must be a dream. This dream sure feels real, as if. Yiyun looked at his surroundings, and felt diffident. It's too real. He pinched himself hard, and the result was pain. Another pinch. It still hurt. This isn't a dream. This shit really isn't a dream. Yiyun felt lost. Could someone tell him what was happening? Yiyun was cursing in his heart. Could he have already died when he was buried alive in the cave, and when he dug himself out, all the digging was just an illusion before his death? But, the 2 words "beloved brother," what did they mean? He didn't have an elder sister. If a person had to be pointed out, it would be someone who lived in another city whom he infrequent had interactions with, nor did he meet his cousin much. Why would she erect a tombstone for him? If the tombstone's Yiyun was someone else with the same first and last name as himself, it was still impossible. How could such a coincidence happen, climbing out of a grave of someone else with the same first and last name, Yiyun? Yiyun felt extremely confused. At this moment, he looked on in a daze as a girl dressed in rags, carrying a basket, walked towards him along a tiny village path.